Good morning, Psych students. Happy Friday. Hope the week is going okay for you guys and you're ready for a good weekend. As we head into the home stretch with e-learning and the last couple videos I'm going to make for Psych of the Personality. Today, we're talking about negative social influence. So grab your notes and go through it. We've got prejudice and discrimination, the stuff we went over yesterday, scapegoat theory, social justification theory, and things like that. Today, negative social influence. So, for the whole theme of social psychology, the influence other people have on us, or how we interact with groups, group dynamics and things like that. And so, today's stuff kind of on the negative side. And it says negative social influence. Things that perhaps groups influence us to do that we wouldn't do otherwise. So, I'll start off with the first one, social loafing. And it's a fun one to discuss when we're in class together, because think about it this way: how many of you have ever been in a group where, on a group project where you had to do all the work and other people just sat back and did nothing? Or how many of you are the people who, when you join a group, you do nothing and you let somebody else carry the load for you? Essentially, we have a term for that now. You can describe your friends in the future if you're ever stuck in a group and you're writing the entire paper by yourself or doing the whole project by yourself, and your friends are taking naps or playing video games, you can now refer to them as social loafers. Definition of social loafing: the tendency to exert less effort in a group. The tendency to exert less effort in a group. And it's something probably we're all guilty of. I remember being the person who would carry their groups through social studies and English and foreign language projects. And then when it came to, say, math and science, well, I'm going to let somebody else take the lead and just watch what they do. And hopefully I'll pick up some knowledge, but definitely not exerting as much effort as I did in the classes I was pretty good at. And that's social loafing. So we tend to, in a group, whether, we could say it's a tug of war situation, homecoming Olympics, and your team is overmatched, or you feel maybe you have that giant offensive lineman at the end. Well, he's going to carry the load. I'll just pretend to pull. Okay, social loafing. The second one, group polarization. So group polarization has to do kind of with the opinions that people have, or the thoughts that people have, attitudes people have. And the idea is that in a like-minded group, first part of the definition, in a like-minded group, opinions become more extreme. In a like-minded group, opinions become more extreme. So what ends up happening, I think, I'm the type of person, probably not a good thing. I don't just read articles on the internet, I actually look at the comments section. And it's just a disaster, and it makes me lose faith in humanity. But it's still a very good example of group polarization, because in a group situation like that, where everybody's like, well, Trump, you start off with people saying Trump is a great president, Trump is the best, blah, 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 blah. And then what happens is, because everybody's in agreement, it keeps getting more and more extreme. So Trump doesn't go from just being a great president to he becomes Jesus Christ. A very extreme opinion. And you have the same thing on the opposite end. Articles criticizing President Trump start off with, I don't like economic policy, immigration policy, and then it gets more and more extreme as the comments go on, to then people who are like, I hope President Trump gets COVID, things like that. Things that you definitely wouldn't say in real life, but behind a screen we all feel anonymous, which we'll get to that term in a second. So the idea of group polarization, think about it this way. You'd say maybe you're sitting around criticizing your favorite psych teacher, and the first few comments are, he's boring, he's bald, you don't like him. And then after 5 minutes of discussion, I don't know, Kyler's like, let's go burn down Mr. Bowden's house. Okay, that's group polarization. So you go in a group where everybody's in agreement, your opinions keep becoming more and more extreme and more out there. Okay. It's important to differentiate that from groupthink. And this is something my AP kids have a hard time with a lot, so I'll try to make it clear here. We'll start with the story of groupthink. Irving Janis came up with this term after studying what happened at the Bay of Pigs. Now, the Bay of Pigs incident is a U.S. history story during the Kennedy administration, where Castro and the communists had overthrown Batista and the Cuban government that had been friendly to the U.S. Now Castro has power in Cuba, and it's run by communists, and they're allied with Russia, and this scares us because he's only 90 miles away from Florida. So Kennedy and his administration has a great idea. You know what? We're going to take Cuban refugees and we're going to train them. We're like 1,400 Cuban refugees. We're going to train them by the CIA, and then we're going to send them back to Cuba, and these 1,400 people are going to overthrow the Cuban government because the people of Cuba will rise up, and it's all going to be a wonderful and awesome revolution. So they tried it, and it didn't work. The people were all captured or killed, and the people of Cuba didn't rise up to support them, and afterwards everybody's sitting around watching like, I guess we knew it was a terrible idea, but we went along with it anyway. That, in essence, is groupthink. Okay, so it's kind of related to group polarization in this, in the sense that, you know, maybe a terrible decision could be made, but in groupthink, what ends up happening is you, even if you disagree with the group, you swallow that disagreement. Okay, you stay silent because group harmony is the most important thing. Okay, so the idea of groupthink is that, you know, dissent is not tolerated because group harmony is important. Okay, so you think about the Kennedy situation, and, you know, when I taught U.S. history, I'd often talk about, you know, President Kennedy is the most handsome president we've had, and people, you know, he comes to you and says, you know, hey, are you on the team? Are you on the team? You want to be part of my team? And people are just like, oh, of course, Mr. President Handsome. And, you know, they go along with it even though they know it's a bad idea. That's groupthink. So you think about any situation, let's say, you know, Keelan and her softball friends, some of them say, hey, you know what we should do? We should go to Buffalo Wild Wings for dinner. And, you know, Molly and the rest of the team, yeah. Keelan doesn't feel like it, but I really like Buffalo Wild Wings. I'm allergic to chicken, But she goes along with it anyway. That's groupthink. Okay, she decides to go with the group rather than disagree with the group. Okay. De-individuation. Okay, de-individuation relates to some of the when you have crazy people on the internet spouting horrible things, and they'll do it behind their keyboard, and then in real life they would never do that. That relates to de-individuation. De-individuation basically is the loss of personal responsibility and identity in groups. Loss of personal responsibility and identity in groups. So, I'll give you an example from my own personal history. I may have told this story before, but I was kind of a rude high school basketball fan. Our games were kind of raucous affairs, and I went to Rockford Auburn. As I've said before, Rockford Auburn, a much more diverse school district than Lincoln Way is. 40% white, 40% African American, 10% Hispanic, 10% Asian. And we go to these games, especially against suburban Rockford teams like Belvedere and Hononegah or Rockford Boylan, where the players were predominantly white. And in a large group, not proud of this, but does make for a funny story, we would often shout racial slurs at the white players. Okay, like I said, not proud of it, but it's a good example of de-individuation. Because if I ever met one of those 6'5", 6'6" guys on the street, I would never say horrible things to them like I shouted to them from the stands. Okay, I would never do anything like that. But in a group, well, it's not like the player is going to come into the stands and punch me in the face. Okay, that 6'7" white kid from Rockford Jefferson or Rockford Guilford, isn't going to single me out, come into the stands and fight me. My identity is lost in the group. I no longer feel personally responsible for my actions. And you can see this is one of those things that occurs in riots. Hey, if everybody in the street is rioting and looting after the Bulls win a championship game, the NBA championship, flip cars over, set them on fire. You would never do that by yourself. In a group, you do it because, well, they can't arrest all of us, that sort of thing. That's de-individuation. Another example of that, because you feel anonymous. You're not going to be held responsible because of the group. People wearing masks. Okay, you've probably all seen the movie The Purge, or at least heard of The Purge. The idea that when you're in a mask, well, you can't be held personally responsible for your actions as no one knows who you are. You've lost your identity. You have anonymity now. willing to get away with it. So I can, wear a mask and go beat up Mr. Gallagher and feel powerful and like no one's going to hold me responsible. Or, I hide behind a screen name, Star Wars fan 22, and I can say terrible things about the movie or, great things about the movie, and nobody's going to hold me personally responsible because nobody knows who I am. Or, in a group situation, we're going to, tear down the goalposts after West wins state in football, and nobody's going to hold me responsible. So that's the individuation. It's kind of a scary term, the idea, but it happens frequently, as you probably know. Okay, so last one in there, and the most depressing one on here, bystander effect. The tendency not to help in group situations. And it's different from social loafing. Okay, social loafing, you exert less effort. In this case, bystander effect, say for instance, Ryan's walking down the hall and he drops his books. Okay, and it's a crowded hallway. The vast majority of you, even though you're good people, will walk by. Okay, for a number of reasons. Well, it's a crowded hallway. Somebody else will help. Well, I've got to get to class. I don't want to be late for world history. I don't want to be late for music class, whatever. You rationalize it. You come up with excuses. But in a group situation, we are less likely to help. And we'll talk about things that counteract that next week. That's the bystander effect. And the term that comes up because there's a tragedy in New York City in the 1960s where a woman named Kitty Genovese is walking home from work, late night shift, and she gets attacked outside of an apartment building. And as she's screaming and as the attacker is going after her, the lights come on in the apartment buildings around, or the apartments around where she's at, and people look out the window and watch, and they don't do anything. They don't call the police. They don't come downstairs or shout anything at the attacker. Nothing happens. It's kind of a horrifying experience because this woman ends up being murdered, and people watch, and they don't do anything. That's where we get the term the bystander effect. How could people, in a group situation, they're all watching, but nobody's doing anything? A lot of stuff. The stuff we'll talk about next week, how to counteract the bystander effect. And a lot of research has gone into what factors make us more likely to help in those situations. But the bystander effect, whether it's Ryan dropping his books in the hall or Kitty Genovese getting attacked in New York City in the 1960s, shows that in group situations we are less likely to offer help. So it's kind of a bummer filled with lessons, but what we're going to talk about on Tuesday next week when we come back after you guys have a good weekend is positive things. There's such a thing as positive social influence as well, ways that we do help each other, ways we can overcome some of these negative social influences, and that's where we'll finish the unit. So we're going to finish the unit next week. There will be a test on Microsoft Forms coming up, and then we'll pretty much be wrapping it up, pretty much be done with Psych for the year. So have a great weekend. We'll see you again on Tuesday.